For our panel discussion of careers in science communication. My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School here at Duke. And I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of my colleagues from the Office of Postdoctoral Services. We have Molly Starback, the director here, as our videographer this morning, videographer extraordinaire, I should add, and also our co-sponsor, the Duke Career Center. And this event this morning is part of a year-long series on careers beyond academia. I would also say joining us from the Duke Marine Lab over there are our colleagues, graduate students at the Duke Marine Lab. So if I wave over there or seem to give attention to the laptop, there really are people on the other side. Just to let you know that. Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead and move to introducing our panelists as our last folks join in. So starting to my far right, we have joining us Robin Arnette, who is a science writer and editor at NIEHS. She holds a PhD from the University of Toledo in biochemical and molecular parasitology. To her left is Lauren Anderson. She is currently a research development associate in the School of Medicine here at Duke. She holds a PhD in neurobiology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and a bachelor's degree in neuroscience from the Johns Hopkins University. To Lauren's left is Kendall Morgan. Kendall is currently a freelance science writer, and she holds a PhD in biology, ecology and evolution specialty from the University of Oregon. Then, second to the last here, Abby Olena, who is currently a postdoc in Science and Society here at Duke, and she is a former AAAS Mass Media Fellow and science writer for The Scientist as well. She holds a PhD in Biological Sciences from Vanderbilt University and a bachelor's degree in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from Hendrix College? Yes. We have a little extra word here. Okay, great. And last but not least, we've managed to bookend the panel with Robins, I think. Robin Smith, who is a science writer for the Office of News and Communications here at Duke. She holds a PhD in biology from Duke and a master's degree in ecology and evolution from, tell me how you pronounce the name of your university.
I was at a university in France called the University of Montpellier, like Montpellier, Vermont.
Perfect, thank you. And a bachelor's degree in biology and French from Vanderbilt University. That explains the master's degree in France. Excellent, welcome. So we're so delighted to have all of our panelists join us here this morning. We have a list of questions that many of you submitted upon registering for today's session. So we'll start with those questions, and then as time permits, we may be able to take some questions from the audience at the end. But I've gone ahead and shared your questions with the panelists ahead of time so that they could prepare. So I'm going to start with Robin Arnette down at the far end of the table. Could each of you tell us about your job responsibilities?
I work in the Office of Communications and Public Liaison at NIEHS. And so my job responsibilities range from writing press releases, to updating the website, to writing short summaries about the research that's going on at NIEHS. I could be involved in doing Twitter feeds. I'm trying to start a blog that's hopefully in the next few months. So anything that's involved in science, that's what I do. I have also written a few scripts or science videos that talks about the work that goes on at the Institute. So that's a lot of time that you get to write. And
development at the School of Medicine here at Duke, we primarily do grant and grant writing support for complex and a few individual grants. So we work on a lot of the program project grants, the P30s, P50s, the U grants. For any of the faculty members in the School of Medicine, we're a relatively small office, but there are 12 offices like us throughout Duke. So chances are if you've written or participated in a complex grant during your graduate school or postdoc careers, you've run across one of us.
So I'll just say, so I'm freelance science writing now as of April. I had been at Duke for a long time doing a lot of the same kinds of things that Lauren described at NIEHS, but for the Institute for Genome Sciences and Policy. now that I'm freelancing, my job responsibilities are pretty much whatever I decide they should be, but I'm working for I've done work for about 7 different organizations. Some of them are nonprofits, some of them are publishers, scientific journals. And what I'm looking to grow into more is pitching individual stories to more popular science news places, both online and in print. So since I'm kind of growing this business, I've basically found a lot of things that are regular. So it's not that I'm having to find every single thing every time, but it's still a little bit variable in terms of what I might be doing in a particular week, depending on whether I have a lot of deadlines that week or I have some time to think about maybe some story ideas that I want to pitch someplace. And I'm also kind of juggling right now because I have small kids and I'm in a transition year before the youngest one starts back to school. So that's kind of part of my reality, is that I don't have as clear chunks of time like probably most people here do, but I have like smaller windows throughout the day.
Hi, I just came to Duke in August to start as a postdoc in Science and Society, and there I'm doing a lot around science communication. So we're running a program this fall to help faculty better communicate their science to non-specialists, the public and policymakers. We're also running a graduate student class next semester called Science Communication for Scientists. It'll be a similar thing aimed at graduate students, and if any of you are interested in that, I'd love to see you in the class. But before that, as Melissa said, I was a AAAS Mass Media Fellow, summer 2013 at the Chicago Tribune, and did about 8 months of science writing for the Scientist magazine and online.
And I'm Robin Smith, and I'm one of 2 science writers in the main news office here at Duke and on the campus side of things. And as I probably clear looking at this panel, every university, every hospital, every federal research institute, any kind of place that does any kind of research has a small army of reporters who keep tabs on the research happening at that place and translate it for general audiences, and that's me, and that's most of the people on this panel. Although not all of us are women, despite how it might appear.
I think a lot of us are.
But a lot of us are women, strangely.
We did invite 3 men to the panel, I would say.
Maybe they said no. Anyway. But I am, ostensibly, my job is to cover the physical sciences here at Duke, so math, physics, computer science, chemistry, statistics. Although, because of my background, I got a PhD in biology, evolutionary biology, in 2005 here at Duke. I end up covering pretty much everything on campus that is physical sciences or life sciences. So, I just started this most recent job in July. Before that, I had a similar position at the Duke Lemur Center and also at a biology think tank run by Duke and UNC and NC State called the National Evolutionary Synthesis Center. But since I started this job, just to give you a flavor of things, in recent weeks, I've worked with geneticists who are engineering drought-resistant crops. I've worked with developmental biologists who are trying to understand how cancer spreads and becomes invasive. I'm currently working with a mathematician who's trying to understand the influence of gerrymandering, so redrawing electoral district boundaries on election outcomes. I worked with, done profiles of chemists who are basically hunting for new malaria drugs. It's really all over the map, and I might be doing all of those things in any given week, and working on all of those stories in snippets in any given week, so I have to do a lot of, like everyone on this panel, a lot of gear shifting.
So Robin already started answering this question, I think. What's a typical week like for you? And so you talked a little bit about, kind of all the different stories and angles. And how much of your time is actually spent writing versus doing other tasks? And maybe if we could start with Robin Smith on this end and work our way back down.
Sure. So in my new job, I am, the majority of my time is meant to be spent writing. And that writing might include everything from So yesterday I spent, just to give you a sense of what I did yesterday, I spent 4 hours of my morning with a cameraman in the math department filming an undergraduate researcher, a math major here at Duke, who is working on this gerrymandering study. And I went from there to, in the afternoon, working on, I interviewed the Dean of Natural Sciences here at Duke about his work on, but a science paper he has coming out where he uses some of the latest advances in light microscopy to image fruit fly embryos. And that's cool because light microscopy and advances in it won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry recently. And he's a co-author with one of the Nobel guys. I will probably go back to my office after this panel this morning and prepare for a media training workshop I'm giving on Thursday. So I do spend a small fraction of my time teaching, probably 10 to 25% of my time teaching, both leading, either teaching a 2-hour workshop, or I recently taught a 6-week media training workshop for graduate students. So none of the classes I teach are semester long, but they tend to be within the 2-hour to 6-week range. So that's a flavor for my week.
So now I do almost no writing unless it's writing about the research that I'm doing, which is how we can best train scientists to talk about their science, or blogging for the Science and Society blog. But when I was a writer, I was writing and reporting pretty much full-time. So sort of two extremes.
Yeah, a lot of weeks I'm spending most of my work time writing different projects that I might be doing for nonprofits or publishers, like I mentioned. Other weeks I'm spending a whole lot of time looking for good stories to pitch, and sort of reading up on what different outlets are actually publishing. And so that's what it takes to sort of get in there with some of the more popular places. You've got to find stories they're not already doing that they actually want to do, and start developing relationships with editors. So a lot of weeks, I think almost 100% of my work time would be writing, and some other weeks it might be a much smaller fraction than that.
I think depending on where we are in the grant deadline schedule will sort of dictate how much writing I'm doing. Right now we're in the middle of some of the major grant deadlines, so about half of my time is spent writing and editing, and the other half of the time is meeting with the faculty members and the different teams to sort of get them to tell their story in a compelling way. We work with a lot of the bridge faculty members, so faculty members who lost an R01 or trying to renew that one or get a new one. We work with, again, the program project grants, and as we approach those deadlines, about 2 weeks out, it's 100% writing and editing and trying to get the grant out of the door. And our cycles are sort of feast and famine, so when there's a lot going on, there's a lot of work to do, and then as soon as that deadline passes, it's like a week or two where there's nothing to do, and you go have a vacation and realize you have a life, which is actually kind of nice. So yeah, anywhere between 50-50 to 100%.
Like everyone else, it tends to range. I'd say maybe 70% writing. Another thing that I have to do at work is to deal with the media. So if CNN or someone from NBC wants to speak to a researcher at NIEHS, they have to come through the Office of Communications, and we have to help set up that interview. And if the researcher hasn't had any media training, we or I would go and kind of do mock interviews to help prepare them on how to answer the questions in short bursts of science, not long, drawn-out sentences, which scientists tend to do. Because the soundbite these days is like, what, 4 seconds? Back in the 60s, it was 40 seconds. So our attention spans are short. So get the point out as fast as you can. But I say now 70% writing, and again, that can go from web updates to press releases and so on.
Thank you all. So tell us a little bit about how you found your your current job? Did you just apply online? Did you find it through networking? Or did you find it some other way? And I'll ask for Lauren to lead us off this time.
Okay. I did apply for the position online, but I found it, I guess you could call it through networking. The PI I was working with at the time was on a program project grant, and my current boss now was assigned to our team, and I got to talking with her, and she liked sort of my working style, and when the position came open, I applied for it, and now it's here.
Kendall, you must have an interesting story.
I'm trying to think where I should start. You don't want me to talk about kind of how I got into science writing to begin with, just how I got, okay. Well, the way that I'm finding individual jobs now is it really is largely through networking. There are some good networks for science writers. One of them is through the National Association of Science Writers, which is something that you should definitely check out if you're interested in a career in science writing. They have annual meetings and a number of different listservs that members can belong to, and jobs that get sent out through that network. So some of the work that I've found has been through that. The other network of science writers that I have, will touch on kind of how I got into this career in the first place, is through the University of California, Santa Cruz Science Communication Program, which was how I transitioned from graduate school in biology to science writing, having never done it before, never written for a school paper, or any of those kinds of things that some people that are interested in science writing have done. And so basically that program's been around for about 30 years or so, and it's pretty well known for people looking for science writers or editors or sort of anything in that vein. And so quite often there will be jobs that come through from the director. He's fairly selective, but people kind of know to reach out to him with opportunities. And then the other way is through other science writers that I know. And I recently went to, there are lots of opportunities like workshops and smaller sorts of things. So I recently went to a workshop in Colorado that was specifically for freelance science writing, since I've been science writing for a long time, but had never actually freelanced full-time until recently. And so that was made up of, there were about 15 or so people that have different experiences in terms of editors they've worked with and this kind of thing. So networking is really helpful in terms of knowing who the editors are, knowing which places take freelance pitches at all, and just getting some tips on what they look for and that kind of thing. So I have found that networks are great for finding opportunities.
So the postdoc that I have now, I found sort of through a network also. I didn't know that Science and Society existed. You guys are all in Duke, and probably you haven't heard of it either. But so it was a friend of the husband of a friend talked to somebody, and our associate director now, she contacted me to see if I could do marketing for them, and I've never done marketing. And but then I knew about it, and so then when I saw that they had a postdoc, I applied for it with my science communication background, and it turned out they were starting up this huge science communication piece. So I really just fell into the very right place at the right time. The AAAS Mass Media Fellowship is something that you can all apply to as graduate students and within a year of your PhD. So you just apply. And the scientist job that I had, I was basically a writing intern for them, and that's something that you can apply to even if you have finished your PhD and if you're a postdoc. It's not very good money, but it's really great experience. So.
And I found I've had now, I guess, 3 jobs in science communication at Duke, and networking has been important each time, but the specific networks that helped me out were, after I finished my PhD, I took a funky postdoc teaching writing to first-year students here at Duke through the University Writing Program. They offer this teaching postdoc, and where you design and teach writing courses in your field. And I had no idea I was going to end up doing what I'm doing now, but I was definitely trying to transition in some kind of way. And during that time, I joined 3 professional networks that I think were pretty key in helping me get my subsequent jobs. One was I joined the organization, one of the organizations that Kendall mentioned. I joined the National Association of Science Writers and started lurking on their listserv and going to their professional meeting, which happens in a different city across the country every year. I just got back from Columbus, Ohio, which is where their latest meeting was. I also joined a group here locally here called Science Communicators in North Carolina, which has been a little bit less active lately, but still a local professional network of science communicators. And I also started going to the people like everyone on this panel who are based at Duke, the communicators at Duke have a monthly professional development meeting where they talk about some campus issue related to communication. And I just crashed their meetings. There are 100 people in the room. No one knew I wasn't supposed to be there. And I would just lurk in the back and listen to their conversations, talk to them afterward. So I was starting to try to ooch and kind of squeeze my way into these different professional groups. And I would tell everyone I knew, friends or people I would have coffee with at these meetings I was crashing, that I was looking to transition. And I got my my first job, science communication job here at Duke, by telling everyone I knew I was looking for a job. And 1 week, 6 people sent me the same job ad. 6 different people from one was a friend in theater studies. So people who really don't have any reason to be helping you into science communication can help you get there. Saw a job ad, knew I was looking for this kind of job, sent me the ad. A cousin, all these various people saw the same ad and forwarded it my way. And that job ended up being my first job in science communication here at Duke. And then my second job in science communication I got by, my first job was funded on a federal research grant, and that grant money was winding down, and I knew I needed to find a new gig. And so I started contacting directors or research institutes here in the Triangle and telling them, this is what I do, this is what I can offer. If your team, if your group, if your department, if your institute needs something like this, please keep me in mind. And I sent out 10 of those emails and heard crickets for 6 months. And then 6 months later, one of those directors emailed me and said, Robin, I don't know if your ears have been burning, but we've been talking about this, we have this kind of need, and we'd love it if you would. And we're thinking about creating this position. We'd like to talk to you more. And so just, it ended up being this sort of, you can also get a job by just telling people you want a job, and they will help you. So.
Can I add one thing quickly before you go to Robin about National Association of Science Writers? You can join as a student for 2 years. You can join without any writing clips. So for professional members, they require that you have written something in a real publication and have it published, and that you also have 2 other members of NASW vouch for you. But as students, you can join and you have 2 years worth of student membership, and it's cheap. It's like $50 or something, and then you still get access to all the listservs, and you can go to the meeting and that kind of thing. So that's something really good.
For me, when I was looking for a job, excuse me, I had maybe 15 different job search engines bookmarked on my computer at home. So I would check them every day. And one of those was USA.gov, which is the website that lists all federal jobs that are open. And with the right editor, spot came open, and I applied.
Excellent, thank you. Lots of different stories there. I want to follow up on something that Kendall brought up, and that is she actually pursued a master's degree after her PhD and to have this credential in science communication. What do you all think? Is that a necessary element to making that transition? Is a postdoc useful? What additional credentials beyond the PhD would you recommend people who are trying to break into the field might have or should have now? Maybe I'll start with Abby on this question.
So I have heard just really fantastic things about that UCSC program, and everybody knows it. And there are a couple other science writing ones. There's one at NYU, I think, that is really good.
And a couple in Boston.
And a couple in Boston,
Yeah.
that are great. And so if some more school is something you're excited about, then I think that there's there's nothing wrong with going to do it. I was not excited about more school, and then my PhD. And so another really great option is the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. So it's super competitive, right? But if you apply and get in and do it, everybody knows it. I would say probably as well as they know these sort of programs and trust that you've had this sort of training experience. So that's something just really fantastic. And I sort of talked to a lot of career people about making a transition into something that wasn't bench science. And what they told me by and large was that you don't necessarily need more school, though it can really, really be helpful, but you just need to show that you're committed to the path that you want to walk, right? So that's joining a professional organization, that's finding an internship, that's auditing a writing class here, or something just to get you experience that shows that you've tried to do it. So I think you have lots of options. I think people make the transition from a postdoc, from a traditional bench postdoc. To me, that felt like a traditional bench postdoc felt like it was just postponing the inevitable kind of thing. Like I knew I didn't want to be a PI, and I didn't feel like I needed more training to know that I didn't want to be a PI. So, but I think if you already are a postdoc and you're thinking this is not something for me, then you absolutely can still move away from that.
So I considered, after finishing grad school, I considered doing a training, getting a certificate in science writing, or pursuing a master's program. And I was actually really, I've always had sort of journalism school envy, and so people who do have that training, I always sort of wonder what they know that I don't. And so I was very interested in the program that Kendall did, and I got as far as, I retook the GRE. I had taken it, it had been 12 years since I took the GRE, so it was quite some time. And I can't tell you that even if you do fabulously on the GRE, if you wait 12 years, you can really vomit. And I did. And it's just test taking is its own time-limited skill. But but I knew I would need to take out a loan in order to do this program. They're not free. There are some limited fellowship support. And by that point, I had started writing for a couple of campus editors on campus, and I was doing some freelancing for the News and Observer at the time, and had started to get some clips. And in the end, I decided, screw it. Rather than take out a loan, I'm going to, and I had actually, this was key, I guess I had applied for and gotten a job as a science communicator at this biology think tank called the National Evolutionary Synthesis Center. And I thought, all right, forget it. Rather than going to debt, I'm going to just learn on the job, get a paycheck, stay put. And so I was just about to sort of leap across the country, and ended up not doing graduate training in science communication. I still had journalism school envy, and still think about taking night classes at Carolina, which has a fabulous journalism school. And I would say that when I go to professional meetings for science communicators, about half of the people I meet are former science PhDs who jumped ship and just knew the science and learned the writing trial by fire, just on the job. And the other half are professionally trained journalists, so you can go either route. But if you jump straight from bench science to writing, you've got to have evidence that you can write. And so you have to, if you're not going to, and one thing I didn't have that I think that kind of program can give you is a professional Rolodex. So when you leave these programs, you have dozens and dozens of contacts who recognize your pedigree, if you will. And so I was able to build a Rolodex by sort of staying put in a local area and making contacts in my community. But had I gone to a program like Kendall's, I probably have a bigger national Rolodex. So
I'm going to ask if Lauren wants to comment on this as well. More education versus postdoc versus not. What do you think?
So I did a postdoc. One of my coworkers did a postdoc. Our boss was both a AAAS Mass Media Fellow and worked in the News and Communications office at Duke. And our other coworker was a health administrator before she became a science communicator or a writer. So it really just depends on where, I think it depends on where you are and where it is you're trying to go. Part of what we do is sell the science of the faculty members, and if we can't sell ourselves, it's kind of hard to convince somebody that you can help them sell their science. So I would say figure out where it is that you want to go and sell that.
Is anything else to jump in? Yeah.
Just quickly, I did my postdoc at UNC School of Medicine, and again, I knew I didn't want to be a PI. Just do it. So I said, what career would give me the opportunity to stay with cutting edge science, but not have to be a slave to the bench for 7 days a week, all year. So that was writing, science writing. It allows you to stay on the cutting edge, to know everything that's coming out, but because you're at that nexus, you can translate that to general audience, because the majority of the population that's out, they may have one science class, maybe. So you can take that work and translate it for them, and I think that's the coolest thing to do.
So one thing, first of all, UC Santa Cruz is 1 year. It's actually not a master's, it's a certificate, because you can't, although maybe there are exceptions to this, the science and science might be a master's in 1 year, but usually it takes a couple years to get a master's. The way that I've thought about it is not that I needed a program, but I kind of viewed it as the easy way. I mean, a lot of it was very, very practical. So there were classes, but there were also internships built into the program. So, and then there's this network that has been built up. So, I mean, what you really need is, as everybody's kind of said, is evidence that you can write. So you can do that on your own. You can, especially these days, I mean, you can start a blog, and people get paid to do their blogs, and some of those people, were scientists who don't have any particular training, but they like to write about science for general audiences. So there's lots of different ways to do it. You can offer to sort of volunteer for the local news office. That's an idea that comes up a lot. I know there's some people here who found interesting ways, because it's also not just all writing. There's the Center for Documentary Studies. Depending on kind of what sort of mode of communication you want to do, there's different opportunities that you can find. But I did think that it would be the easy way. It kind of automatically put me on this track to science writing. Many people, I mean, there are exceptions, but I think most of the people who go through that program do end up with jobs in science communication, and it's 10 people a year, and so it just automatically gave me these opportunities to work. First, I worked at Stanford Medicine News Office, and I also did some writing for something that Science Magazine was doing at the time called the Science of Aging Knowledge Environment, and then you have to do a full-time internship after the 1-year program. And I also got lucky. I did assume I would have to go into debt, but and I'm not sure how things are these days, but I actually got a fellowship from a national lab in Idaho that paid my out-of-state tuition and gave me a stipend, and then I had to go write for them for 6 months and got paid as a postdoc because it's government, and if you have a PhD, they say you're a postdoc. So, so in terms of debt, whether you're going to go into debt, I mean, I'm kind of happy that I didn't, and I sort of assumed I would, but you just never know. And so it's not necessarily a plug that everyone should necessarily do the science communication program, but it could be something to consider. There's a different director there now than there was when I was there, and it's, I believe, still the only science communication program that is specifically for people with science backgrounds. So there are other science communication programs, but UC Santa Cruz says that you have to have full-time research experience. There can be other people who are out of undergrad, but somehow, there are people who do hardcore research as undergrads, and so that's okay. It's not that you have to have a master's or a PhD, but many people that go through the program have that. Many people that go through the program have AAAS mass media fellowships. So, it might be a personality thing, like how how much do you think you can really go out and build your own network? I might be someone who, like, starting from kind of nothing, that would be kind of a challenging thing to think about. Or I just, I didn't know science writing existed much before I went to that program, and so I didn't have, I guess, anything to grab onto, and I kind of applied to lots of different things. I wasn't sure I was going to go do that. I didn't know if I'd get in, but then when I did, I just went, and I was on this other path that's worked for me. So it's definitely not required, but it's an option.
Kendall, you mentioned that there is more to the field of science communication than just science writing. So we did have a question from the audience. What other modes of science communication are out there? And I'll let anybody jump in who wants to comment. What other opportunities are there?
I guess I'll mention too that I've had experience with development and fundraising has come across, and I don't know if the news office does anything with the Office of Development, but some of what our office does is meet with some of the flashier members of our faculty and figure out what they're doing so that the development office can pitch it. Alternatively, in another life, I was an intern for research and sponsor programs at UNC, and they had a federal relations office, and Duke has one as well. And part of what we did was figure out what's going on in the system or at the school and explaining it to them, and usually they would follow up with the news office and send someone to do a story or to just get more information for different types of audiences. Trying to get someone's money is slightly different than trying to get the government's money.
Our office employs some people who tell stories in different, using not just writing, in different media. So we have a full-time video producer who is this morning shooting. She's meeting with a research dietitian here on campus who's going to tell us what Halloween candy is really bad to eat, and then we also have, she works on other stories as well, obviously. That's just what she's doing at the moment. And then we also have a full-time graphic designer who just tells sort of visual stories in different ways. And he doesn't just cover science. So our office is responsible for covering the sciences and humanities and and to some extent, some student news that isn't covered by the Chronicle. So pretty much anything that is sort of university news so his story plate might be anything from, I know he's working on currently using his design skills to develop an interactive quiz to illustrate research in decision sciences here at Duke. I don't know if you've heard Dan Ariely's work on decision science. Anyway, so he's basically just using his kind of web design skills to develop this, but he might also be working on an infographic or making a collage of images from the university's Instagram feed, whatever, just using his design skills, putting those to work to help tell stories visually. So
this isn't about me, but one of the guys I was a mass media fellow with is Joe Hansen, who runs It's Okay to Be Smart, which is a PBS digital short that's on YouTube. So he has a PhD from UT Austin in Texas, and just started making science videos because he thought it was cool. And as he was finishing up his PhD, he knew he didn't want to stay at the bench, and he just started making videos and putting them on YouTube. And PBS Digital Studios picked him up, and now he gets paid full time to make a video every week for them. And so that is a pretty unusual, but fairly awesome SciComm thing that he just is doing because it was something that he loved and that he thought was important. So.
So actually, I guess when I went through the program, most of the courses were science writing. The program is actually called Science Communication. I think they are doing a better job now, or I was actually there like about 12 years ago. So I think they have incorporated more web and video and multimedia kinds of coursework into the series than they had before. But there definitely are people working in science communications in places you might not think about. radio, TV, but also like museums. There are people who've gone on to do things like museum exhibits. Some of that might be writing, but it's also, you know, putting things together in a different way than you might think about. And obviously, you know, video kinds of things around here. I mean, I've been really tempted myself to take some classes at the Center for Documentary Studies, but I haven't actually found the time to do that yet. But, you know, more and more, especially with the web, I mean, people really like the idea of mixing in, you know, I mean, a good image is, just even an image is like really great in terms of a story's life on the web and in social media and video too. So, I mean, any of these skills that you put together can be useful to people like that. I mean, in the news office or, you know, if there's somebody who knew how to put together a video, that would be an asset.
I got asked what my multimedia skills were when I interviewed for my latest job. So more and more, even if you're applying for a job where your title is writer or something, you'll be expected to also be a one-man Photoshop expert and amateur video editor, and at least be fluent with taking photos and video with your cell phone and cobbling them together into something that might be useful. So. Although I wouldn't describe those as my strengths, I'm really, really most comfortable on a keyboard. I taken week-long video production workshops just to say